Welcome to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. Serving others. That's how Jennifer Oyer, founder and chief joy officer of Community Impact Advisors, describes the foundation of her life and her work in Hawaii, across the Pacific Islands, and around the world. For the last 2 decades, she has led and grown development efforts at organizations across the islands, including the Salvation Army, the Arthritis Foundation, the Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii, and her own alma mater, Hawaii Baptist Academy, before launching her firm in 2019. Always leading by example and with generosity, Jennifer has been active on several nonprofit boards, as well as in supporting the profession, including her current role on AFP's U.S. Foundation for Philanthropy. We spoke to her at her office in Hawaii.
I started my career in development when I graduated from college, and I, of course, needed a job. So I called my old boss. So I did work study in high school, and I was in the HR department. So I called my old boss and I said, "Hey, I just graduated from college. Do you have anything available?" And he said, "Well, actually, I am going to be starting, I moved to the development department and I'm going to be starting an alumni program. Is that something that you'd be interested in?" And I said, "Absolutely. I would love to do that." One, it wasn't just a job, but I got to be back at my alma mater. So I joined Hawaii Baptist Academy's development department, and I was doing alumni relations and annual giving. So that was kind of my first taste of what fundraising is, and I loved it. And so from there, I just kind of, got to learn a little bit more about philanthropy, and went to the University of Hawaii and worked for the foundation there. And that's really where I kind of honed my skills in major gift fundraising. And so I did fundraising at the law school for about 4 or 5 years. And then I wanted to really then kind of take on more of a management and learn about leadership. So I went to the Arthritis Foundation, which was a small organization here in Hawaii. But, we had a small staff, which was great. And I got to learn, and really, that's really where I learned about how to work with your boards and utilize volunteers. And so that was an awesome experience for me. And then I went to the Salvation Army, where, Salvation Army's big organization, and learned, I guess, I would say, that's kind of like the huge breadth of really what a fundraising machine looks like. I mean, I had a large budget, and, I had marketing and communications under me, and emergency disaster services. So I really got my hands in a lot of different areas, which taught me a lot about how to build this comprehensive fundraising structure. And so that's kind of my journey in fundraising.
It starts with your high school, which sounds like it was already a pretty pleasant experience. So what about that school was special for you? How did you end up electing to go there? And what made it so unique for you? Yeah,
Hawaii Baptist Academy is a really special school. And, parents should send their children to wherever is the best fit. But, HBA, it was a good fit for me. And it's a small private Christian school. And what's so unique about it is that it's a Southern Baptist school. But the majority of the donors to the school are actually from Texas, Oklahoma, in the Bible Belt region. And they donate to the school because they consider it a ministry. And so that's when I, being my first job, that kind of opened my eyes to what philanthropy truly was. I mean, there were these people who really have no connection being in Texas and Oklahoma and, Virginia, all of those areas, they have really no connection except that they consider it a ministry. And to learn about why they were so passionate about supporting scholarship and supporting children with the opportunity to get a private school education, to me, that just kind of blew me away. And I learned about people's generosity, and that's really where I learned about connecting the donor's passion to the needs of the organization. And so HBA, it's, like I said, it's a really special school. And I just learned a lot about fundraising and philanthropy there.
Your parents, were they connected to the Southern Baptists, or did they just see the school and think that was a great school? How did that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my cousin was going to HBA, Hawaii Baptist Academy at the time. And I think my parents just wanted to give me the best education that they could afford. And HBA is a top private school here in Hawaii. And it was close to where we lived. So, yeah, that's how I got connected. But that's really where also I became a Christian, and where my parents became Christians too. So it really had an impact on our entire family, for sure.
The school itself, on making that faith journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty interesting, because you often think about the experience for the student, but not necessarily it then having an impact on the parents in that way. What was that like for you and for them?
I think it was when I look back on it, it was such a meaningful time for my family, I think, because, when you're in high school and you're a teenager, you're going through all of these different, it's like being on a roller coaster, right? You have some great days and you have bad days. But I think that it allowed, being in that kind of close-knit environment, I had really close friends that I grew up with from elementary school all the way through high school. And so my parents got to, of course, become friends with my friends' parents. And so it kind of built this close-knit community that I believe was helpful for my parents. And so when, we'd have sleepovers and get-togethers with my girlfriends, the parents would get together and they'd kind of talk story and commiserate and talk about, all of the problems that their teenagers are going through. So it just really built a sense of community that I think was helpful for my parents and allowed them to kind of get away also from their jobs, because they had really stressful jobs. So I think just having that sense of community was important.
What kind of work were they doing that was so stressful?
They both worked for the federal government. They worked for the FBI. And so, I remember growing up at dinner time, a lot of times dinners would be very silent because my parents could never talk about their work and what they were, the cases that they were working on. So, I would say their jobs were pretty stressful.
Wow. So you could know they were in the FBI, but they could talk about what they were working on. Yeah. So often it's the teenagers keeping secrets, maybe unintentionally, from their parents, but this time it was the other way around. What was that like for you as a kid?
Well, learning about my parents working for the FBI, I didn't think about it at the time. Like when I think about it now, I think, wow, working for the FBI, I think it takes a lot of, those that are in there and, special agents, whatever, they truly want to serve the community, and they really do care about the state of affairs here in the United States. And so when I look back on it now, I think, wow, they were doing really important work. And, they were trying to ensure that, like I remember my mom would go out at night on like a drug bust, and she'd say, okay, your dad's going to be home with you, and I'm not going to be home when you wake up in the morning, but just know that I'm going to be okay and I'm safe. And, at the time, you don't think about, you're like, okay, see you tomorrow. But now when I look back on it, I think, wow, they had a really exciting job. I'm sure at the time they didn't think it was that exciting, but, they were doing good work and trying to keep our community safe. And I think, wow, that's really awesome. They really took their job seriously, and they really cared about making our state and our country better, despite what people think about the FBI now.
Well, before we even go there are so many things we can talk about, especially the servant piece of that, kind of the service element that's been such a big part of your life. But it might be helpful for most of us who don't know Hawaii, like you've lived it, to know where you're from exactly. Hawaii is made up of several islands, many islands, and it has its own character in each place. So where's your family from?
Thank you for asking, because Hawaii is very unique. And I know, when you're in fundraising, you tend to think, well, my organization is very unique and where I live is very unique. And so that makes us special. But Hawaii, I mean, I'm biased, but Hawaii is a special place. And you're right. Every island is different. And even within the island, the pockets of community and different nationalities and cultures are so varied. And so I was born in Japan, in Kumamoto, and I was adopted but raised here in Honolulu. And I call myself a townie because I was, pretty much lived my life in Honolulu. But, just from doing fundraising and being a consultant, how we do fundraising here in Honolulu is so different from how you do fundraising on Hawaii Island, which is where, people on the continent might be familiar with Hawaii Island because that's where the volcano just erupted and there was lava. And so that's a totally different community, and how you do fundraising is different from all the opposite end when on Kauai, which is the northernmost island of the island chain, and how you do fundraising there is totally different. So it's really about building relationships and getting to know the people and learn how, I guess, coming in with a sense of humility and wanting to learn about their culture. I think that's the most important thing to remember here.
It's also arguably the most diverse place in the United States, if not one of the most diverse in the world. Lots of different populations. I mean, you've even got that in your own family. So I don't know, are your parents originally from Hawaii as well, or where are they from?
My mom is from Hawaii, and my dad is from Ohio. He's from East Liverpool, Ohio. And he made his way to Hawaii because of his job working for the FBI. But, I would say I had a pretty diverse childhood because during the summers, my dad they had what they called home leave for the FBI. So the special agents could fly back to their area where they're from and kind of take a vacation for, 2 weeks or whatever. So every year my dad would take home leave, and instead of going back to Ohio, because who wants to hang out in Ohio for 2 weeks?
Ooh, we'll have to edit that part out. No, we'll leave that in.
he would use that time and we would go and just kind of travel the continent and take advantage of being on the continent or on the mainland, which was really great for me because I wouldn't have had the opportunity.
Together as a family, you were traveling around. Oh,
yeah, together as a family. And, so I've had the opportunity to travel to all 50 states at least twice.
Oh, wow.
And, learn about the different cultures. And some summers I would stay in Knoxville, Tennessee with my godparents, and my parents would just kind of drop me off there for a month or two and pick me back up at the end of summer. So it was really great just being in that kind of different environment and that culture and having that opportunity to learn about, the different types of food and hear the different accents. So for a Hawaii girl, it was really cool.
I'm trying to imagine also you have that, again, the diversity within your family. Do you have any sisters or brothers?
I have a brother. He's 7 years younger than me. And he just started his entrepreneurial journey. He was an engineer for about 10 years. He went to a really great school, engineering school. Mm-hmm. And he came back to Hawaii and he worked for a local company here. And I think like many other, entrepreneurs, and I think for a lot of people after the pandemic too, he just kind of got a little antsy and he's like, I really want to do what I want to do, what I'm really passionate about. So he started a nonprofit. It's a basketball clinic. And so he's doing that and he loves it. And
wow, in Hawaii also.
In Hawaii. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So your family's all kind of, again, if your parents are living, you're all in the same area still.
Yes.
And I have the impression that you said that you were originally adopted from Japan. So have you been back to Japan at some point? I mean, as an adult or as a youth, or what has that experience been like?
Yeah, well, I had the opportunity my entire family, we had an opportunity to go back to my orphanage when I was a sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. And it really was to get health information, but my dad just wanted me to have the opportunity to see where I came from and make that connection for me, which I'm so grateful that he provided that for me. But I haven't been back since. And, but I actually it's something that I do think about often, whether it's culturally, there's just little things, Japanese things that are kind of ingrained in us that we, it's just a part of us. So I do actually think about my roots and where I came from quite often.
You're surrounded where you live with Japanese culture, Chinese culture, Korean culture. I mean, every possible culture.
Right.
And I'm sure that all of that's feeding into your sense about this kind of rich, melange of different ways of viewing the world and experiences coming into it. And that must influence also the way you think about working with others. Obviously coming from a position of interest and intrigue, and how does that influence the work of organizations in terms of fundraising? Are they being more interested in and respectful of all these differences, or do they try to kind of bring them all together? We've had a big conversation finally about diversity and trying to define it more inclusively in the last few years. Mm-hmm. But Hawaii itself is an example of all these people living together forever. And I'm curious to know if the organizations there have been more mindful of that, of each kind of slice of life that makes up the diversity of Hawaii, and if that influences how they engage with them, talk with them, invite them to participate.
Oh, that's interesting. Of course, I would like to say yes, but I feel like Hawaii has always been, and I don't know, maybe this sounds a little naive, but I feel like Hawaii has always been a little more inclusive and diverse when it comes to fundraising practices, because that's just how we grew up. And it's just part of our DNA almost, when you go to a potluck or when you go to a party or an office event, you'll see foods from all different types of culture, right? You see Filipino food, Chinese food, Japanese food, and because that's just who we are, and it's a part of us. And so I feel like in some way, Hawaii has always been inclusive like that. However, I do appreciate the fact that nonprofits are starting to think much more broadly when it comes to, how they put their boards together, their board of directors, and how they think about building much more meaningful relationships with people. So it's not just about, focusing on major gift donors or those that are the most rich, right? I think that people are starting to think much more broadly about engaging donors regardless of the amounts that they give, because I think that's key to building this solid base for support. And I think more organizations are starting to realize that.
This is something you've talked about before, about the importance of donors at all levels, not just in terms of the revenue, but really welcoming everybody in. And that must have been especially important in the last nearly 3 years. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the pandemic, both from that standpoint, but also what it's meant for you. Any kind of observations you've had or changes you've made as a result of living through this kind of collective strange experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, this is kind of off topic, but I do want to thank you, Jay, for just the amount of education and content that you've been providing for the nonprofit community over the past 3 years. It's been amazing that the people that you've been able to bring onto your podcast and into your webinars, and all of that has just been so valuable and so rich for the nonprofit community. So thank you for that. And when I think about what's been happening over the past 3 years, and when I work with my clients, I always go back to monthly giving donors and monthly giving programs and building that out, because I truly believe that that's fundamental to building a healthy nonprofit program or fundraising program. And so that's one of the first things that I try and implement when I work with any client if they don't have that, because I've seen that organizations that have monthly giving programs, that has sustained them throughout the past 2 or 3 years. That's been resources that they've had built up over the years that have kept them afloat during the pandemic. And they were able to rely on that money when their special events went away. So I really believe that monthly giving programs and donor stewardship and building much more meaningful and intentional relationships is what is going to sustain organizations moving forward.
We've had a lot of conversation recently about what some people are terming a generosity crisis, but people have talked about the erosion of the donor population around the US in general, sometimes around the world. And this idea about monthly giving, about engaging people and keeping them involved really meaningfully, not just with our handout, but really engaging them as people, is so important. And you've worked on this with AFP as a whole as well, mm-hmm. Correct?
Yes. I really believe that keeping in mind, developing these high value relationships with people that are loyal and giving regularly to an organization is just as impactful as a donor that's giving 6-7 figure gifts. And because, we've seen many times donors that give regularly, monthly, are the ones that are the most invested in the organization and tend to also leave estate and gift plans to the organization because they're so connected and they've been giving for so long. And so I don't want organizations to only think about people that are giving 6-7 figure gifts. I want them to start to think about people that are giving the $5-10 gifts every month, and then moving them through the pipeline and encouraging them to give larger gifts over the years. And doing that by engaging with them regularly and building these meaningful relationships with them.
Flipping that around, do you have any thoughts on why, though, we're seeing a general trend for a smaller and smaller percentage of the population giving? Is that something that is happening to Americans, or is it something that we're doing wrong?
I don't know. I haven't actually. Hawaii might be, I would say, a year or two behind the trend. So really, we haven't seen that here where major gifts, fewer donors, larger gifts. But I don't know. I think it's something that organizations just need to be much more cognizant of and aware of, and think in a comprehensive way. So, yes, major gifts will always be important to an organization, and dealing with those high net worth donors will always be important. But I encourage nonprofits to, if they see that trend happening where, less donors and larger gifts, think about, okay, acquisition is always going to be important, I think, to a nonprofit. Live-bunts will always be important, and reconnecting with them. So how will you make your organization much more comprehensive and robust, and think a little more broadly about what you're going to be implementing into your program in your fund development plan every year to increase that base of supporters?
Maybe part of that is a stewardship discussion too. And I know that for those who have not met you, you do some of the most sincere and thoughtful work in thanking people, and just reaching out to people of anybody I know in this field.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sure it's benefited your business, or at least I hope it has, but that doesn't seem to be where it comes from. It seems to be very much just who you are. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about for you and where that comes from, and the importance you attach to that kind of stewardship, or just displays of gratitude, or engaging with other people in that way?
Well, thank you for that. I would say that, I don't know, I've always liked to give meaningful gifts. And, whenever I'm shopping, I think this person would love, this book, or I think this person would love that. So I'm always trying to think about others and what would make them happy or bring joy to them. But I think that that's why, in some ways, I've been really successful in fundraising, because fundraising, it's about building relationships, right? And when you are working with donors, you need to remember what their dogs' names are, and you need to remember what their kids' names are and what they're interested in. And, that's really, we don't do it, or you shouldn't be doing it because you see the dollar signs at the end. You do it because you really are trying to connect with someone and build a meaningful relationship with them. And one example that happened recently is I was having lunch with a donor, and he was, saying that he always gets in trouble because he forgets his anniversary. And I said, okay, well, tell me now, what is the date of your anniversary? And I'm going to put it in my calendar. So sure enough, the week before, it was in my calendar, and I ordered these a beautiful bouquet of paper roses. And because, the paper roses, I mean, it doesn't die, right? It's around forever. It looks beautiful. And so I ordered it for him, and I dropped it off at his office. And I dropped it off the day before. And I said, okay, your anniversary, just a reminder, is tomorrow. So this is for you, and give it to your wife, and, have a great time. And that totally blew him away. And he was like, oh my gosh, no one has ever done that for me before. And he called me the day after, and he's like, you saved me. So he was really grateful. But that, just something super simple like that, I mean, it makes an impression, right? And it's those little things, I think, that help to build those relationships that you need to with donors and also constituents.
Some people have said that doing that kind of thing, like the handwritten note, is either old-fashioned, or they say it's part of whatever culture, or I mean they're attributing it, all these things to those little gestures that you're mentioning. And you did just say that it can be beneficial to fundraising, but you're talking about something deeper, and I alluded to this before, and you have it actually in your LinkedIn profile. When you write about yourself, you just say serving others. And what you just described was kind of a gesture of that. Sure, there's a practical implication. If this guy delivers those paper roses to his wife, I'm sure that makes for a happier marriage. And it makes it definitely a happier relationship between you and that donor. But it's also just a really nice thing to do. But you have to make efforts to do those things. Why? What is the argument that you would make that there is a benefit to society as a whole, perhaps, for making these individual gestures build relationships? Because some people would say, you know what, that's taking time away from helping people. But it seems like you've made an argument it's quite the reverse.
Well, I always go back to Hank Rosso's quote, fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. And that really resonates with me because philanthropy is about joy, really. And I want people to be able to feel that and experience that. And I want them to experience that so that they can learn and then also apply to an example that they may have or a situation that they may have. So I think about, when I work with boards or when I work with executive directors, and executive directors are having a hard time connecting with their board of directors and getting them to engage and understand what the mission is, and they have a hard time encouraging the board to raise money. I always go back to, okay, what are some mission moments or donor or experiences that you can provide to your board members so that they can see and feel and touch and experience the same kind of passion that you have for the organization? Because everyone needs to have their own experience, right? So my hope is that when I do little things like that, it provides that experience or that little spark of joy that person can then pass on.
But where did
And
you learn that? Because it must have been an example to you. This is something I often ask people about how they got their start. And they'll often talk about their professional arc, and you've shared that. You also shared about your school, which was very important to you and your family. You must have seen an example at some point of where doing things like this really is meaningful in a relationship between people. Do you remember some of those early memories?
Well, I would go back to my time at Hawaii Baptist Academy. And, I spoke earlier about the donors, right, who are from Oklahoma and Texas and the Bible Belt area. Every year in February, those donors would fly to Hawaii on their own dime and spend a week visiting the school so that they could learn and see the kids, see the children that they were supporting, meet the teachers, and build deeper relationships with the school. And I feel like I learned that serving others and wanting to help others through those donors that were flying on their own to visit a school in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and see the lives that were being touched through their philanthropy. And that's always left a huge impression on me. And it's something that I want others to experience as well, and it's a big reason why I continue to encourage executive directors and nonprofit leaders about providing those special experiences, because I feel like HBA did it so well with that 1 week. We called it Mainland MAC Week, Mainland Advisory Council. And so that 1 week of these mainland constituents coming to Hawaii and spending time on campus with the students and with the teachers, that was so impactful for me and left an impression. And that's kind of how I learned about providing those experiences.
It also must have had an impression on you about what a donor does. And you're a donor as well, right?
Yes.
So how do you make those choices? And what is bringing you joy as a donor?
Well, so for my 41st birthday, I gave a gift to 41 different organizations to see who were, just organizations that, were meaningful to me, but also it was a test to see who would respond. And out of those 41 organizations, I got only 16 acknowledgement letters back. And out of those 16, only 3 handwritten cards, thank you cards. And that was eye-opening for me, not only as a consultant, but as a donor as well. And so the organizations that I work with, I get it. Nonprofit leaders are doing a lot. They wear multiple hats. They're very busy. But if they could take the time to simply send an acknowledgement letter or take it one step further, my gifts weren't large, but those that took the time to write a handwritten thank you card, who do you think I'm giving money to now, a few years later? It's those 3 organizations that took the time to write that handwritten card. And I'm giving much more than I did in that initial gift, because over the years, they've taken the time to get to know me, learn about what my passion is about that particular organization. And I've gotten to learn a little bit more about what they do. And so one organization that, I used to see their special events happening in town. And I used to think, man, their overhead must be like crazy. Their ROI on that special event is probably not good. So I never really gave to that organization. But when I got to learn a little bit more that's where the test came in. I got to learn a little bit more about them. And actually, they invited me to and I got to see the impact that my money had on their organization. I thought, wow, this is amazing. So, I think that organizations, if they can think about, again, providing those experiences, even to small level donors, segment your groups and provide donor experiences to your different groups. I think they'll find it very worthwhile.
This idea about taking that extra care with donors, some people would say it's not just a matter of time, it's just volume, right? That if you have 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 donors, how in the world could you write 100,000 postscripts? But I guess what you're describing is a way to just, if you think about them as individuals, then maybe that makes it a little bit easier to swallow. That if they were, family members, we would do that if we could.
Right. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that that's really where, for nonprofit leaders that are having a hard time with time and don't feel like they have a lot, that's really where they can utilize their board members, right? To write those handwritten thank you cards or utilize their volunteers. One example during the pandemic, I had a client where I encouraged them to utilize their volunteers to write, to do phone calls and thank you notes when the pandemic first hit. And it was so impactful for the board member, the board chair, who's, I would say, can be a little rough around the edges and a little grouchy at times. I gave him the assignment and I said, okay, this donor made a $250 gift last year. Can you take the time to call her and just let her know the status of the theater and just thank her for her gift last year and wish her, ask if she's doing okay. And so the board member did just that. He made the phone call. And a week later, that organization received a $1,000 gift from that donor because the board member took the time to just call and check in and say thank you. And so, we're teaching the board member how to build relationships and how to show care and show that we're not just thinking about the money, we're thinking about the person behind that. And that's really important to me and in building relationships.
As you talk about all this, I realized that one thing you talked about with respect to the Salvation Army is that you weren't just on the fundraising side, you were really involved in the mission, that getting the work done. And I remember talking to you around that time, I think, when there was another major lava flow. Mm-hmm. And there were rocks of lava spewing out and hitting people's homes and, injuring people and, destroying roads and all these things. And you were flying all around, I think, checking on people and making sure things were going okay. I'm wondering if maybe sometimes these silos that we have in the world of the nonprofit space, impede our ability to see people as you saw them when you were worried about somebody who's the direct beneficiary of our work. You were talking right now about working with board members individually, really working with them as individuals. I'm wondering, do we need to find ways to get closer to the action, whether that's closer to the people on the board, closer to our donors, closer to the mission, serving people at the food line, making sure people can get from their house when it's on fire from some chunk of lava. What do we need to do to make sure that we have in our hearts the situation of our donors and our beneficiaries?
Mm-hmm. I would say that I mean, I would encourage all nonprofit leaders to get out and have their own mission moment, or what I call mission moments, and personal story to tell. And because that is how you're going to get ambassadors, right? That's how you're going to get people to talk about your organization. And to me, that has been the most transforming element in helping to develop boards. When we can provide opportunities for board members, again, to have their own story to tell, they're going to be your biggest cheerleader for your organization. And I feel like nonprofit leaders and staff members too, the development staff, need to have their own stories to tell. So go out and participate in, if you work for a homeless shelter, participate in a day with your program people so that you can see exactly what the frontline people are doing, so that you have your own story to tell. And, I think about what philanthropy really means, and, why we're doing this, why we're working tirelessly to serve the nonprofits that we work for. I mean, philanthropy for me is about not only love for mankind, but it also provides this kind of joy in healing. And it helps us understand, okay, why do people give? Well, people give for all kinds of healing reasons, to honor a loved one, or to, maybe they were a recipient of the service that they received, and so they want to give back. Or philanthropy allows a community to really heal, like how we saw with the lava disaster. So I really feel like if we can provide those opportunities for not only our staff members, but board members and donors, the impact of philanthropy will be so much greater for your organization. So, does that make sense?
It does. And you use the word joy again, and that's right in your then title that you kind of creatively invented for yourself at your firm. So now you began the firm almost immediately before the pandemic.
Yes.
It was 3 years plus ago. Community impact advisors. You've been working on a lot of these issues with organizations. Your work goes back with the entire community a long time, but particularly in the last several years. So I'm curious about a couple things. One is how you've kept your level of enthusiasm up, and to do this work with this passion, and to do so at a time that was arguably one of the toughest that we've encountered in the country's history, but particularly because if fundraising is about engaging with others, if philanthropy is about engaging with others, there were protracted periods of time when we felt we couldn't. We were in fear of one another because we might get sick, or we were just feeling like we had to honor whatever the local health codes were. But whatever it was, we couldn't just sit down and, have a drink or play Monopoly together. So what kept the joy in your heart, and where are you as we hopefully gradually come out of this?
Well, so my title is Chief Joy Officer, and that was very intentional. And I don't want to say that I made it up myself, because it actually comes from a book from Richard Sheridan. And he talks about what a joyful leader looks like. And a joyful leader, they are authentic, they are loving, humble, visionary, they're servant leaders. But for me, it was to just that reminder, or that title is a reminder to always, we can always redefine who leaders are. And, it's not so much a job title as it is a state of mind and a reminder to myself that I want to be a different kind of leader. And joy is about this profound change that we are trying to make in the world, in our community and in our world. So it was very intentional, and it's just a constant reminder of how I think I should be in the community. But so I say that to say that I wasn't always joyful, I guess, during the pandemic. I mean, it was a really difficult time to see a lot of my friends that are nonprofit leaders struggling, but it just made me just kind of confirmed and affirmed why I wanted to go off on my own and try and support as many organizations as possible. Because I truly believe that if we focus on the fundamentals of fundraising, we can build this healthy revenue. We can build healthy revenue streams, which helps to build sustainability for organizations for years to come. And that's really what my mission is. You know, I'm like so passionate about teaching the fundamentals of fundraising to our nonprofits because I have seen how important it is and how the organizations that I've worked with have thrived because of that. So I want to teach that to nonprofits here. And so that's kind of my work in a nutshell and what I'm so passionate about.
So what are you looking forward to next? You've been doing this for nearly 4 years. It's kind of a different emerging world, a different landscape. What's next for you?
I would say slow and steady wins the race. So leadership is a journey, right? And what's next for me is just continuing to reach out to as many nonprofits as possible. And I think for me here in Hawaii, especially, we don't have a lot of professional development opportunities. I'm so grateful that you were willing to come out here to Hawaii, but to have that kind of level of expertise here in Hawaii it's hard. You know, it's hard to get leaders like you out and professionals out. And so I feel like my role as a consultant through Community Impact Advisors is to provide those opportunities to nonprofits so that they can see what else is out there and see that there's national experts that are willing to share their knowledge with our nonprofits here. And, I feel like we depend on help from others. And if I can kind of be that bridge, that's my role. And I also am really passionate about helping nonprofit leaders think about not just the tactics and, the fundamentals of fundraising, but also remind them that they need to think about themselves and they need to take care of themselves before they can take care of others. So I'm really big on providing those opportunities like forest bathing to my clients so that they can experience, just a different way of being mindful and think about giving time for themselves and focusing on themselves.
The Philanthropy Masterminds podcast is underwritten by DonorSearch, the world leader in donor intelligence solutions. Our producer is Jack Frost. Our theme music is Be My Remedy, composed and performed by House of Say. You can subscribe to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find blogs, webcasts, and CFRE accredited webinars with our featured masterminds at DonorSearch.net or check the show notes and descriptions.